Chapel Hill, I'm not exactly sure, testified before Congress and were pretty evasive when questions were put to them around anti-Semitism on campus. When they were asked whether anti-Semitism would constitute a violation of their code of conduct or their harassment code, they were told that it would be contextual, and basically ummed and ahed and didn't really give a good enough answer, which has produced ongoing scandal. The rest of the presidents have resigned. Claudine Gay has now resigned amid also the revelations of plagiarism in her 1997 thesis. So, guys, I want to hear, so what do you think about this? Michael, I'll come to you first. What do you think about her resignation? What do you think about the circumstances? What do you think about the plagiarism?
What I really find interesting about this, more than the plagiarism, more than her performance before Congress, is the response to her resignation. I read today that she was pushed out by a mob, it was stated. And it's interesting to me because the Harvard types aren't really interested normally, or too concerned about the mob ganging up on people or shaming people, or as we've seen with these, when conservative speakers go to speak on college campuses, for instance, and the mob shuts them down and doesn't want to hear them. I don't recall Harvard protesting about, we shouldn't be catering to the mob, but all of a sudden, because it happens to somebody on their campus, there's people from Harvard saying, oh, the mob pushed her out. The other thing I found interesting, ridiculous, and disgusting all at once was Ibram X. Kendi of How to Be an Anti-Racist fame. He's out there saying that this is about race and this black woman was pushed out, because she's black. And I just wonder, in the mind of the CRT woke types like Ibram X. Kendi, can black people never do anything wrong? I mean, is every single thing that they ever do or ever get in trouble for just because of their race? I mean, as far as I know, there was somebody else, at least one other person, maybe two, that resigned over this issue from other colleges. And what's the reason there? It wasn't race then. So that's to me is the most interesting thing about this, is the response that's coming from her supporters.
Yeah, I thought something very similar about the mob thing. The University of Edinburgh here basically often endorses the mob, in the sense that the students occasionally decide to storm a building and engage in a sit-in entirely with the faculty's permission to do so, basically, which isn't exactly as hardcore and radical as you might think it is. And I think that's typically the case across a lot of universities across the world. So to hear she's been pushed out by a mob and all this kind of stuff sounded a bit strange to me. John, what was your reaction to all this?
Yeah, I was thinking a lot of the same thoughts, is that this whole thing is going to get the woke mob just more fired up, because she's only there for 6 months. She wasn't given enough of a hearing for her plagiarism accusations, and all this stuff. They've even admitted it was a Republican mob, and that's what, I don't remember what article I read that in, but they were saying that was the problem that should have raised red flags, that it was a bunch of Republicans. If it weren't Republicans coming after her for this, then you guys wouldn't have said anything. I doubt that. But it's just, I'm glad she resigned, but I just think this is going to further the culture wars more than anything. And it's also not getting at the fundamental problem, which is government subsidizing these universities. It's creating a monopoly of these ideas, and people need to see what they've been paying for the last couple decades, and it needs to end. And I'm just afraid that now, with all these private donors leaving the scene, it's just going to give them more reason to go to the government and ask for more money, because we're so broke, we're going bankrupt, we need your help. And the private donors can, they can walk away, but us taxpayers, we have no choice. I am forced to pay for this ugly, hateful, divisive, woke, CRT, whatever it all is, and it's just wrong.
Absolutely. And I think there's a stink about the reaction from the people who are saying that this is lamentable that she had to resign, that anti-Semitism is in a sense the racism which the right cares about, and so therefore they're kind of a bit suspicious of it, and so they push it away. So the fact that she's had to resign over anti-Semitism is viewed as kind of like typical of the right-wing people are trying to get her. It's not viewed as a legitimate offense that people have taken the comments that she made about anti-Semitism before Congress. Razi, what was your view on all this? I mean, I saw the title today is plagiarism a Zionist conspiracy? Is it a conspiracy?
No. So yeah, sometimes we put serious questions in the title. Usually when it's a question, it is not a serious one. We have the answer, and we expect the at least existing audience to know what our answer will be. Yeah, John, I'm glad to hear she said she blamed the Republicans. I think that's easier than blaming the Jews. I think she'd have a little bit of a problem putting it that way. That's probably what she really means. Since Mark is here and we have this dynamic of, I'm the negative one and he's the positive one, and I'm actually going to make my negative comment and then leave. But I will say that to me, this is it's good that she's gone. It is really too late, and it is again a sign of the worst elements of the culture still being more powerful than we'd like them to be. That she lasted this long, that she can get away with crying racism when she first of all couldn't answer whether calling for the genocide of Jews is harassment, and then she's clearly guilty of plagiarism. I mean, what more needs to happen? And again, Michael's point is for people who make these who push this line. Is there anything that Black people can do that they can be held accountable to? And of course, the answer is probably no, and that is a form of racism if you use a proper definition, which as we talked about in the Zionism episode previously, they don't want to use proper definitions for anything because it makes their case very difficult. Since I do have to leave, I want to remind people that tomorrow on the Daily Objective, I'm interviewing Eitan Fischberger, who went into UNRWA teachers' Telegram group and got some interesting stuff there. So he will be joining me for that. And since I know you guys are going to be talking about Turkey later, let me just say Turkey sucks. Thank you, guys. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.
Fair enough. So Mark, what did you think about all this? And by the and just a general question to everyone. I haven't actually seen what the plagiarism is that was in her thesis. Has it been published? I'm not really sure. But also Mark,
yes, it has been published. She and somebody on the panel probably know the particulars better than me, but I think she's failed to cite 3 excerpts from an author's novel, not novel, but published work, and that person came out and publicly acknowledged it. So I read about it in the Post, and they did quote what it was, and it is a verbatim ripoff. I don't know what Razi's talking about. I don't know that I can say that I'm the positive voice, especially in a situation like this. I totally agree with everything he said about Miss Gay. I'm very happy that she resigned, unhappy in the way in which she did it. She still has the wagons circling around her in academia, as the little racists over there in the DEI departments can't acknowledge that they're hopelessly failed on this, and to acknowledge that would be to acknowledge that they themselves are racist. So I'm actually, John, not concerned about the private people pulling all of their money out of Harvard. I think it's a great thing. I think they're starting universities elsewhere. I think now people understand to some degree the virus that is affecting academia, and we now, for the first time in a long time, have the opportunity to give it a vaccine. Right? We have an opportunity to push it out. Because I think homeschooling and private schooling is now more popular than ever. And I don't think that's going to wane. I think we're going to see a continued progress in that realm as people really begin to contact how corrupt this this racialized view of America is. If you guys haven't seen American Fiction, it's already coming out in the movies. You should see that movie. I think it's an important movie about this mind virus that's affecting academia and our culture. And it's predominantly promoted by white lefties.
What movie was it? It's called American Fiction?
American Fiction. Yes.
Okay. Is that just online, or is it?
No. I think it's one of the nominated films out there. I think Jeffrey Wright has been nominated for an Academy Award for the lead in that. But it's about this kind of perpetuation of stereotypes and racial tropes that really restrain blacks, and it's really, and there are blacks who exploit it, of course, as Ms. Gay has done. But this is really about white liberals and what infects them. I don't want to say liberals. Sorry, I hate saying liberals because liberals is something else. White leftists.
Sure. Yeah, I guess in a sense, she's got to be feeling pretty shit about this, that it's coming back from plagiarism from 1997. And I guess this is basically because this would have been before the software was in place that just catches plagiarism like that. I remember when I submitted essays at university, you would get an instant, as soon as you uploaded it, you would get a scan back with the plagiarism percentage of it. And it would just sometimes pick up a quote that you'd used, even if you'd quoted it. But it would sometimes be like 30%, which was kind of viewed as kind of okay. But if you're above 50, then probably you were doing something wrong.
I mean, you think that, three in the doctoral dissertation is, could be an oversight, but 50 so in all of her limited work?
Yeah. So I mean, if they were not attributed, because you can paraphrase, but if it was literally word for word and it wasn't in quotes and it wasn't referring to the author, then that's really bad. It's not like people don't know what they're doing when they do that. So, but I can imagine, like, as terrible as this is, and this is very serious, like especially for an academic and for the president of Harvard, it's not like that she should be given any mercy about this, really. But I feel a twinge of sympathy for her in the sense that maybe she did something stupid when she was younger, and this is coming to bite her. However many years later.
I would feel sympathy for her too if she wasn't so hard on other students in Harvard, and that's part of the problem is that burning hypocrisy, right? She nailed people for the very same thing that she did. I can't stand that. I'm sorry. You gotta go. You gotta go when you do that.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I was going to say something, but my thread is gone. Michael, let's come to you. I mean, so about this, whilst I remember what I'm trying to think of, because you said about the CRT people, can someone who's black basically never do anything wrong. Actually, this connects to what I was trying to say. So there we go. Because, for example, we've been speaking about anti-Semitism a lot on the channel, and how what a lot of people are saying around Israel kind of is kind of similar to a lot of anti-Semitic tropes. And so the people who are complaining that that she's been forced out due to racism, there would kind of be a point that if people were saying about Claudine Gay something like, oh, this is because she was really lazy, that just something like that. If they were even saying something that related to like a black stereotype or something, I could kind of see the point that there might be something like in people's attitude that was kind of racist. But there just doesn't seem to be, like, objecting to plagiarism isn't a racist thing to do. So I mean, one, what do you think about that in general? But how do we make this point in a way that people understand, will kind of get?
Well, first I have to say that there have been some comments like that. I've seen people saying, well, this is what happens with affirmative action hires and when you're doing DEI and, that sort of thing. A problem comes up, and it's analogous to Israel as well, that I'm opposed to affirmative action, right? I'm opposed to it on the grounds of property rights, and that I don't think it's right for the government to use force to tell people who they can and can't hire. The trouble is, racists tend to be opposed to affirmative action also. And then what some people do is they then conflate the two. So while a racist in this case might be adamant that Claudine Gay has to go, it doesn't mean that everybody that thinks she should go is a racist. And it's similar with Israel. I think that some of the language, like for instance, somebody pointed out, or somebody said that the reason that she got pressed out was because of Jewish donors. that it has nothing, that it's not the right-wing critics. It's because there's a lot of Jewish donors who aren't happy with that. I suspect that's probably true. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. If, you know, I'm Jewish, I'm not a donor, but if I were a donor and they were, you know, had trouble calling out anti-Semitism, I suspect I'd take my money back. The problem is that people that are anti-Semitic or Jew haters are likely to say the same thing. And it becomes very difficult to untangle the two, to where is this legitimate criticism, or even if it's not legitimate, is it motivated by anti-Semitism? This is one of the reasons why I'm so hesitant to argue with Israel's critics under the, you know, by blaming them for anti-Semitism. I'd rather just address the issues, because I find that accusations of anti-Semitism, accusations of racism, while sometimes true, are often just lazy. That it gets away from having to actually refute an argument by just attacking the person. Even if the person is a racist or an anti-Semite, if they're making an argument, the argument should be attackable.
For sure. So John, what do you think about this? I mean, so, you know, I mean, when you come across these people, whether it's on social media or in real life, how do you try and communicate to people who are kind of under the sway of the, you know, CRT, these kind of ideas?
Yeah, they're not very easy to communicate with at all. They don't want communication. They want intimidation. Yeah, I really don't even try anymore when I find a hardcore CRT or whatever on the internet. I just kind of try not to give them the benefit of the doubt as much as possible, because I know where they're coming from. And actually, I wanted to mention too, I don't know if you guys saw this, but at like 2 a.m. this morning, Bill Ackman wrote a like 4,000 word essay on X about this resignation, and he's really good on it. He says that the root cause of anti-Semitism, or, you know, this type of behavior, is the diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. One's degree of oppression is determined based upon where one resides on a so-called intersectional pyramid of oppression, where whites, Jews, and Asians are deemed oppressors, and a subset of people of color, LGBTQ people, and or women are deemed to be oppressed. And this was what Ackman said. So he gets it to a fundamental level, because you know, you were asking, can African Americans or Black people do anything wrong? By this standard, no. And you see it applied exactly the same to Palestinians. They can do no wrong. Hamas can do no wrong. They're just fighting the oppression. So that really does need to be addressed. And I'm glad that this guy is doing it. I think that since he's probably going to be looking for some new places to put his money, maybe ARCUK should see if he's looking for any places to give.
Yeah, someone I can't remember. Someone made a comment the other day that we were funded by billionaires, and please just let me say we aren't. And if you know any, I would please give them my email, and we'll sort that out. Mark, so what do we do about this situation in universities, right? Because so these people have apparently been taken away their funding from Harvard, which is a pretty good step. But what do we do in the long term? Because this is really screwing up our civilization, really, all these problems in the university.
Yeah, it is. And it's been screwing us up for decades upon decades upon decades. Well, this is a great movement. People need to withdraw their money from these universities. They see that they're not creating academically honest people. They're not creating intelligent people. They're creating Marxist activists who are using the oppression narrative as a means of, just causing chaos. That's pretty much what they like to do. So withdraw your money, invest in schools that don't take government funds. I mean, there's a few of those. There's St. John's, there's Hillsdale. Now there's the University of Austin, and I think Elon Musk wants to start a university. This can start a parallel university movement. I think the people in politics, they love funding these universities. They like controlling the messages. They like creating these activists. They like, conflict. It keeps us, preoccupied while they steal our rights. But somebody in politics should start defunding the entire school system. Hopefully somebody will have enough guts to do what Reagan said he was going to do, which kill the Department of Education, privatize all education, and this problem would go away, I think, in less than a generation.
I just wanted to say, Mark, I'm very happy that all these private individuals are withdrawing their money. My point was just I'm afraid of this could go two ways. We're either going to defund these universities or they're going to get more money from the government. And it all depends on how this movement goes forward from here on out.
Yeah, that's certainly not an irrational fear. I mean, I think the President administration has shown us that it's ready to double down on its ideology with our money. Thank you very much, Biden administration. So it's not unreasonable, but hopefully the people pressure them to do something else, because I think even people on the left, the more sane liberal elements to the left, are starting to see how crazy this is.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. I think there are some people on the left who are more reasonable who see how reasonable this is. My only as to whether there's going to be an alternative university kind of movement starting. I guess maybe there kind of is, in the sense that, you know, Jordan Peterson is doing some things about trying to do something like that. ARU obviously has been started, but I guess my skepticism or worry would be that so the Conservative Party is in power for the time being in the UK, and that it's something that they've troubled themselves to try and deal with over the last 13 years or so, is trying to, in a sense, de-radicalize the universities, and they basically screw it up every time they try and do it. Because they're trying to basically compel the universities to be different than they are, and you can't force the universities to be different like that. And because they try and basically push a conservative kind of view of things, I would worry about these alternative universities that pop up, is that they would basically try and lean into the conservatism a lot, rather than being kind of more liberal, like in the sense that the universities are kind of a kind of classic liberal education. Do you guys, I feel like a real pessimist on this show sometimes. I feel like I'm just poking holes everywhere, but Joe, do you guys see an alternative university like movement coming up that maybe I'm not seeing? Or
I don't. I'm not optimistic at all about the future. I used to be. I used to think, you know, we could convince people and you just make good arguments, but I'll tell you, this is going to sound a bit ironic, but with 25 years in prison, I was optimistic. A little more than a year on social media has kind of broke me, because I see just how irrational people are. And it seems that the amount of followers that people get is directly tied to the types of irrational things that they're willing to say. And people just lap it up. Yesterday, a guy was making fun of people that wear masks. This guy's running for president for the Libertarian Party. And I asked him, I said, why do you care if somebody chooses to wear a mask? I get we're opposed to mask mandates, but I don't care if somebody wants to wear a mask. It doesn't affect me. And he says, well, you have to shame them and this and that. And I told him, the only people that care that you're shaming this person are the people that already follow you. You're not bringing anybody over to your side with that nonsense. And I think that that's largely, and I hate to say it's the fault of social media, because I'm all for free speech, but it's depressing to me that with free speech, that is what came of it. Because I used to believe in the principle that John Stuart Mill put out, that the more free speech, the better. But and I'm not saying it should be censored. I'm just saying that it doesn't seem that that's actually the case in the short term, anyway. In the long term, it may turn out that I'm wrong, and hopefully I am.
So, I mean, Mark, you were saying that you didn't like being characterized as the optimist, maybe. I mean, do you feel optimistic about the future on this, or less optimistic?
I do. Sorry, Michael. I mean, I think we're usually on the same page, but I do. Just because I see the University of Austin happening, just because I see somebody like Elon Musk turning his attention in that direction, when he turns his attention in a direction, he gets something done there. And I see, wide popular rejection of the public school system. In a sense, the COVID scourge was great for people to see, because I think parents just dropped their kids off at school and assumed things were going the way a normal parent would assume they were going, and they discovered that that wasn't the case. So that has started a massive homeschooling movement and private movement and privatization movement and voucher movement. And I think that's always had a lot of support in minority communities, and I think it's going to gain steam now. Additionally, I see the election of Milei in Argentina as a sign that things are moving in the right direction. Because, I mean, what could be a more contaminated political atmosphere than South America? And yet the people who have experienced leftism in politics more acutely than us even are rejecting it. They're throwing it off. And if he presents a good example to the rest of the world, if he's able to pull this off, this can start a domino effect. Of course, now, to John's point, that could mean that there's a reaction from the left that could be quite unpleasant. They do hold a great deal of power in the information institutions and politically. So they can do a lot of damage before they go out the door. Narcissists sort of like to kill lots of things and hurt lots of people before they are taken down, as we can tell from Hamas. But I do think this is a move in a positive direction. I'm not going to give in to that other side of me, which is on Michael's side, which is just look at the craziness on social media, and you'll see that, you know, this insanity, this mind virus, has saturated everything. It's saturated everything. So I'm gonna maintain a smiling face, Michael. I'm going to keep the smile on, right?
Yeah. No, fair
That
enough.
Lucifer smile, huh?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's the Lucifer smile, so watch out.
Yeah. No, fair enough. I mean, the Milei victory is interesting in terms of optimism, because on the one hand, I kind of agree with you, and on the other hand, if he balls it up, it'll be something, you know, people will always point to that as the example which failed, I guess. But also, like, I think populations who've really experienced real statist kind of socialism tend to be the ones who are the most radical in terms of having the appeal to different kind of ideas. And since Argentina's had, you know, Peronism for such a long time, it's encouraging to see that they're opting for this. If that's why they chose it, I've heard some people say they basically would have chosen any kind of radical change, which is not so great. But we'll see. John, any final words on this before we go to the next topic?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, cool.
Morgan,
So-
can I say something real quickly that does concern me on this? With the idea that a lot of new universities are opening, I think that does have potential for good, but I also think there's a risk there, because if they just become echo chambers where each of them just teaches the specific message that they want to convey, then you end up with just what you have on social media, which is, you know, different silos where everybody gets to hear what they want and then just thinks anyone who says anything different is a moron. So that's a concern that I have, which also puts me on the pessimist side of Mark.
Yeah, but see, the beauty of privatization is that, you know, they could indeed become echo chambers, but you can leave the echo chamber, right? You're not trapped in the echo chamber as you are now. But beyond that, I think like the Barry Weisses and Brett Weinsteins of the world, the Peter Boghossians, they're actually looking for real academic freedom. They're trying to break away from the establishment's hold on the curriculum. So they want a real liberal arts college. They want to expose people to ideas and make it a place where lots of concepts can battle for supremacy. So that's their premise going in. I think that would be Elon Musk's premise going in. And I think the people who have experienced this DEI, racialized, oppressive curricula and want to be free of it are thinking the very same things. You know, they want to return to a university that is a bastion of free thought, where people can argue about the merit of an idea and let the most meritorious one win.
Yeah, I would. Any people who are looking to start a university out there, I think someone you should be looking to hire is our own Nikos Sotirakopoulos, because I had the pleasure of being taught by him on the course he gave about critical race theory. And what was really great about that course was a number of things, but one of them was that his perspective was, I don't want to just rag on these people. I want to understand their position on their own terms, and I want to understand it. What do people find appealing about it? Is there anything true that they have to say? And that was so much more of an invigorating, interesting way of coming to understand a set of ideas compared to when I was at university. I remember I had this professor who very frequently was a kind of walking stereotype who would condemn various things that he disagreed with as fascism, and he'd kind of spit the word. He kind of stood at the front of the lecture theatre and spat, kind of like that. And really, the ideas he was opposing, we were learning about 20th century poets who were conservative, and so he was brushing them as fascism in a way that was really unimpressive. So one, you should hire Nikos, and two, I've completely forgotten the actual point I was going to make there. Anyway.
Hey, I have a question, Morgan. Not to put you on the spot, but did you stand up and say anything to him? Or
no, I probably should have done. I was a fair bit more timorous in those days. The thing I used to do with the professors who really annoyed me, we had a lecture once about Benjamin Franklin's autobiography, which is, of course, this really interesting Enlightenment text where he's reflecting on himself and he's kind of ideas of self-improvement. And that's a much ridiculed text because he draws graphs of his virtues, right? And he ranks them like that. And people say, oh, the Enlightenment, look how stupid and rationalistic it is, as if you could draw bars of virtue.
I did that. I used his system.
Well, there you go. But that inside academia, that's almost viewed as a kind of a symbol of over rational, the Enlightenment's over dependence on rationality, right? But there's a lot that's really good in Benjamin Franklin's autobiography, and this lecturer used it as basically instead of really trying to teach us that text or unpick it on its own terms, he used it as a vehicle for teaching us about an essay, which actually I studied on Nikos's course, which is called Dialectic of Enlightenment by Adorno and Horkheimer, and that is a essay which faults the Enlightenment for leading to the Holocaust. Oh
my God.
So what the lecturer was doing was saying that Benjamin Franklin's autobiography, the ideas in it of self-improvement and so on, led to the Holocaust. And the way he ended the lecture, which got a storm of applause, it really annoyed me, was that he had this big picture of Benjamin Franklin, and he'd had edited it so that it faded into the face of Donald Trump, and he said, behind the face of Uncle Ben, we have Donald Trump, right? And that was his grand finish. That really annoyed me. So what I did for the rest of that year when I was taught by this guy was I wore, this sounds really petty in hindsight, I wore like a tweed jacket so that I stood out because everyone dresses like shit in my lecture theatres. And I sat in the front row and I just stared at him the whole time. And he got really uncomfortable. And that was my petty bit of revenge. So there you go. But no, I didn't stand up and say anything. Maybe I should have done. Okay, next topic.
Well, I think you have to be, in your late 50s and not really have anything invested in the grade to stand up and call him a what?
I should have done, but
I can't say it on here.
Oh, I made the point actually. But besides that guy, I have to say, even in the English department, one of the more departments, I met professors who, once you got to know them, would feel more comfortable telling you that actually they really didn't like a lot of the stuff that was going on campus, and they were a bit more old-fashioned. And even though these are guys who kind of leaned left, who basically believed in free speech and didn't want to be removing text from the curriculum because they were taught by pale, stale, and male authors and so on. So I think there is some hope for certain professors in the university. I think it's a good question as to why they've not been effectual in stopping this, but they do exist.
By the way, another movie that you guys should see is Dream Scenario. If you haven't seen Dream Scenario, check it out.
Okay. Is it about this kind of thing?
Oh, well, no, it's about the social contagion of social media and how it could make someone famous for nothing and kill them for nothing. So I think this is why people are so afraid. This is how it's related. Sorry. I think it's why people are so afraid to stand up to these kinds of voices, because it brings the irrational mob down on top of them. And nobody wants that because they could really kill you.
For sure. Well, the professor I had in mind actually was the professor who taught me Heart of Darkness, which is in a peculiar position of being one of the most taught texts in English literature courses, and also one of the ones that's called most for it to be chucked off because it's about colonialism and there's racism and so on. And he literally told me that he's had students, he said something in class, seen students write it down, and then had it reported back to him from a higher up telling him that he's been reported for saying something about the text. So there really is a bit of an invidious environment about this kind of stuff, unfortunately. But so our second topic today is Turkey. So Turkey has announced that they've arrested, I think, was it 34 people who they've suggested are Mossad agents operating within Turkey. And this is seen also kind of alongside a huge outpouring of anti-Israel and kind of anti-Semitic sentiment in Turkey. So guys, so what did you make of this story in the news? Were you surprised by this coming from Turkey? Erdogan, the president of Turkey, had accused Israel of acting in ways, I can't remember the exact word, but something like in ways which would be befitting Hitler or something like that, was something that he said. So Michael, I'll come to you. What did you think about this? Were you surprised by this?
No, I'm not surprised by it in the least bit. Turkey ultimately is a Muslim country. Yeah, and I think that they're going to side with other Muslims. I don't think that they're going to come out and be critical of Hamas. You know what I mean? So that doesn't surprise me. It also is a very popular thing, it seems, when criticizing Israel to reference Hitler, to say they're behaving like Hitler, or, they're acting like Hitler or some such thing. I think it's gross, and I think that Erdogan's gross, and I think anyone who does that is gross. First of all, it's not an apt comparison, and secondly, it's done intentionally, and the people who do it know exactly what they're doing and why they're doing it.
For sure, and it's something that I said on the show yesterday, because we were talking about people who accuse Israel of genocide, which is always, I think, similar to the Hitler point, because Israel, of course, was founded just after World War II, when Hitler tried to perpetrate a genocide against the Jews. And so when people accuse Israel of trying to commit genocide, there's a kind of there's something that seems very deliberate about using that term or comparing Israel to Hitler, and it's almost kind of like trying to twist the knife and make it worse. John, what did you think about this?
Yeah, I'm not surprised either. Erdogan actually said that what Netanyahu is doing is not any less than what Hitler did. That's exactly what he said. But I do like Netanyahu responded relatively appropriately by saying that Erdogan, who commits genocide against the Kurds, who holds a world record for imprisoning journalists who oppose his rule, is the last person who can preach morality to us. So yeah, that was a pretty good statement. I wish he would have added, though, that they harbor and protect an organization that terrorizes the civilized world, but whatever. I see it as an act of war, just like I would see someone harboring people that plan to have me killed as criminals. That police could go and storm their house and blah, blah, blah. In a context of a neighboring country, it is an act of war. You're harboring people that are trying to continue a war on you, on the other person. So it's ridiculous. And I think a lot of this has to do with the world, largely the Western world, legitimizing these regimes for too long. And so then all they have to do is claim sovereignty in the world. It's like, okay, sure. Oh yeah, you don't see these people as being terrorists, even though they just tried to kill a whole ton of your neighbors. It doesn't matter how you see them. You're holding criminals, and sovereignty doesn't matter at that point.
And so, Mark, what did you think about this? But then, to John's point, what should the international community do about this? I mean, particularly Israel. What should Israel do in response? Because these are Israelis who've been arrested. But what should the international community do about this? Because surely we can't put up with Turkey just arresting people randomly.
Well, Turkey's in NATO, isn't it?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, I think their membership should be taken away right off the bat. They've shown themselves not to be a member of the community of free nations. I think if Israel and the United States actually have its shit together and take care of Hamas, Islamic Jihad, the Palestinian Authority, and Iran, Erdogan's base will sort of melt away a little bit, especially if we get him in our sights next, because he is a real threat to liberty. Let's not forget that Istanbul was at one time a secular. It was like the Paris of the East in a way. It was a secular world. It was a source of knowledge, tourism, lots of communities integrated there. It was a really great place to go, and he's made it a place that's on my no-fly list. It's like, now I don't want to go to this place that has such rich history, because he's turning it into an Islamist country, and he's appeasing his Islamist base. And Islamicism is evil. It's just simply evil. All religion that is practiced by fanatics in its extreme, that isn't watered down by reason or secular concepts of secular rights, becomes evil. And this strain of religion is particularly immune to, in fact, not just immune, but rejecting of Western influence. So, it's time to send them to Allah. It's time to actually take a stand against these folks. I know this sounds terrible and extreme, but they've positioned themselves to be the antagonists of liberty. They will be the antagonists of decency and freedom, rights. And so they are the enemy that we have to fight. So I think he should get out of NATO. Right now, they should dump him. Who cares if he joins up even harder with China and Iran and Russia? We're all a bunch of ne'er-do-wells. And then we need to make ourselves completely independent of him. I think the European Union would serve itself well by going nuclear, getting independent from Russia, getting independent economically from China, as America would, and then let them shrivel and die of their ideology.
Well, see, I want to ask a question since that gets to the point of whether that actually, because you said, sorry if this sounds extreme, I want to ask a question about whether that really is extreme. But just on Erdogan, he's got an interesting history in a way. He's got an interesting personal history, because he grew up, I think, basically an orphan or something, and he was selling pretzels on the street. And then somehow rose to the position of being the mayor of Istanbul. And he was kind of the darling of the West sort of 20 years ago, as this kind of great progressive hope for Turkey when he became the president eventually. Because he apparently represented a kind of progressive view, supposedly. And then fast forwarding to, I think it was late 2016, early 2017, and they end up having that, was it a referendum about the future of the parliament, basically about whether it's going to be a dictatorship or not. And the pretense under which that was held was that Erdogan was saying that, we need to kind of make ourselves more of an autocracy, basically, to be a more modern, forward-facing country in this kind of hilarious way. It's because obviously that makes them much more of a backwards-facing country. And it's interesting to see how someone who was kind of admired for their progressivism became such a kind of conservative and corrupt force. So Erdogan's a strange figure, and so has ended up in this strange position. But on whether
do you actually believe he was progressive? I mean, or just flying the colors to acquire power and support?
Yes, no, yeah, exactly. I think that's much more what it was. But he sort of, I guess, spoke that kind of flavor of politics. And it goes to the way in which people in the West are naive, really, about these people. So and because he's not the only one who ends up as a kind of dictator, really, and who come from that stream.
But that naivete is good. Sorry to interrupt, but don't you think that naivete is good? It's the naivete Howard Rourke had with Peter Keating. When you're a decent person who's virtuous, it's really hard to relate to the kind of mentality that is exploitative and nihilistic and destructive. Don't you think? I mean, so it disadvantages us in some respect because we're not dealing with these people as we should, but it's a decent quality nonetheless, don't you think?
It could be. If it were coming from people who I thought better of, maybe I'd think that, because it's coming from kind of centrist 90s third way style politicians. So it's coming from like Tony Blair and Clinton, right? And from people who admire those people and who love that kind of politics. It's if it were the naivete coming from people like if you told me that Leonard Peikoff had said in the 90s, look, there's this guy Erdogan, he's representing something that would be genuinely progressive in the sense he wants to secularize the country, he wants to do X, Y, and Z, and it just turned out to be a bit naive or something, then I'd say I'd probably agree with what you're saying.
Yeah.
But since it's coming from people who basically by progressive meant like he's going to be more left wing, Um, I kind of agree with you, and I kind of don't. I'm not really. I haven't made up my mind. I'm not
so
sure.
it's coming for his acceptance by the political community back then was coming from political pragmatists who leaned left and liked using state power, thinking that that was a progressive thing, that was going to achieve great values in the world. So it's tainted.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess that's the point. But then as to whether your solution was actually extreme, because I kind of feel the way that what you're saying there, like quite often, and I really don't come from a background of someone who kind of lusts for war, but so with Russia, for example, in 2018, I think I've mentioned this probably on the show to you guys before, but we had a thing that was called the Salisbury poisoning, where a former Russian intelligence officer was living in Salisbury in the UK with his daughter, and Russia sent 2 agents over. They put a kind of nerve agent on his door handle, which he and his daughter touched, and they then went about their day and were found on a park bench in Salisbury, dying, and everything which they touched was contaminated with this nerve agent. That's how potent it was, and the risk was so much that it was worried that if any animals came across this, it could have poisoned the whole water supply in the nearby area, which then would have killed all the kind of livestock for farmers, and any other person who had touched this would obviously die, and so on and so forth. And we got really lucky in that first round that it was contained. Only one police officer unfortunately touched it, and I think he actually died. And then months later, it was found the bottle which they'd used to spray under the door had been chucked in a bin and had been left there the whole time. And a homeless guy filched it out and gave it to his partner as a gift, thinking it was perfume, and she sprayed it on herself. And again, we got very lucky. And they both then died, and which is obviously very sad. But we were very lucky that that nerve agent didn't get into a wider place. Anyway, so this then led to a big scandal in the UK, obviously, and where the Prime Minister had to stand in the House of Commons and say, Russia has just basically tried to commit an assassination on our soil, has killed 2 or 3 British citizens, and could have done a huge amount of damage. And the way I kind of felt about that was, shouldn't we be going to war about this? And I kind of, what I was wondering about it is, because the whole reaction to people when I say it is people kind of felt like, well, that's a bit extreme because it's a small number of people or whatever. But so what, like, so for this kind of thing, like,
yes,
well, go on. Is it unwise?
It's an act of war. It's an act of war. And the only reason I said extreme, because it seems like we objectivists are sort of put into that box because we advocate a consistent application of ethics, and that means that I don't feel sympathy for the bad guys. I'm sorry, I don't. I feel sympathy for their innocent victims. I feel sympathy for all those people who touched that nerve agent because some disgusting, pathological politician in Russia needs to make sure that all his enemies are wiped out and doesn't care what the collateral damage is in that. That guy needs to go. He needs to go. And I feel unapologetic about it. If your citizens are attacked, if the citizens of your state are attacked by the agents of another state, that is an act of war. Hezbollah has been at war with us since the 1970s, and Iran has been at war with us since the 1970s. Hezbollah has been at war with us since the 80s. Islamic Jihad, Hamas, they are all part of the same crew of bad actors, of cancers in the world that need to be cut out. You may not like it. Good people don't like hurting other people, but you have to if you have an ounce of self-esteem. You simply have to. You have to hold your nose and beat the crap out of them until they no longer wish to do bad things to you.
So, and John and Michael, I come to you guys, and we don't have to focus on the Russia example necessarily. It's just it's a good one alongside Turkey, I guess, and so what happened in response when Theresa May, who was Prime Minister at the time, stood up in the House of Commons and said all this, was that Putin actually made a statement. He said that the UK should think twice before insulting a nuclear power, which is rather remarkable, isn't it? So, and I think probably the people who I was speaking to at the time who were kind of resistant to my suggestion that that was an act of war would say stuff like, they would point out practical issues like the British Army is too small and so on. But also they would kind of, I think they would say you might really regret going to war with Russia. So is there a way which we can be kind of smart about this? Or like, do you have to kind of, once it hits that basic threshold, just kind of go to war?
Well, Morgan, the problem that I find with Mark's position and with your position isn't that it's ethically wrong to say, okay, we should go kill Putin in that scenario. How are you going to do it? You think
Yeah.
Britain is going to go to war with Russia and win? I don't think so. You think if Britain launched a war against Russia, they're actually going to kill Putin? No. They might be able to kill some Russian civilians, but they're not going to kill Putin. And it's a similar thing with Iran. Like we're going to go to war with Iran. Okay, are we going to kill the clerics that run that country, the mullahs? Probably not. And what's going to be the cost? So while morally, I have no problem saying yes, it would be okay. It's like it reminds me of when Ayn Rand was asked, "Is it okay to not pay taxes?" And she said, "It's a difficult question." And I'm paraphrasing. She said, "Because of course, somebody's basically robbing you. It's okay to say no, but is it worth the cost that's going to come to you? Because if you take that stand as an individual against the government, you're just going to end up in prison. And if the UK said we're going to go to war with Russia over the poisoning, you're going to end up in a very, very bad way with UK civilians actually dying. It's one of these situations where I just don't know that there's a good answer. And I think that, a lot of people, myself included, have a problem when there's no good answer. I always think there has to be a solution. Sometimes there just isn't. And for Israel in the Middle East, I just don't think there's a good solution for them. It sucks. It's harsh, but I just think that's the way it is. And I think it's similar with Britain in the case that you mentioned. I think it's similar with Turkey now. Throw them out of NATO. I'd be all for America getting out of NATO. That's fine with me. Uh, But if you to go to war with them, that's a different story.
Well, no, I think with respect to Iran, we could beat them in 3 weeks, to be honest with you. Iran is like all dictatorships are a paper tiger. So the Soviet Union at the height of its power had about 19% of our GDP. I think the entire country has the GDP of Texas. They can't fight a superior free force. They simply can't. They
No,
can
but they can hit
pretend
a
like,
button.
oh,
They've got
sure, but
nuclear weapons, and that's the risk. Are we willing to risk that because they killed a couple, some guy or a couple people
so
in
that
Britain?
so I'm not saying that war is the only solution. I'm saying war it is an act of war to do what they did,
It
and that
is. I agree with that.
Britain should be acting accordingly to protect its own citizens. Now, if that means total economic sanctions against Russia, getting as many allies in Europe and in North and South America against Russia as possible, to isolate them economically, fine. In the end, Russia is a militaristic, authoritarian power that is now trying to flex its muscles through the Crimea and through Ukraine. It has its eyes on Estonia. It wants to expand. It wants to create an empire because the man who's running the empire is nuts, and he's got a vision a la Hitler of reuniting Mother Russia and the way it formerly was. That's a very dangerous person. You can kick the can down the road. You can delay the inevitable. But in the end, we're going to have to confront Iran. Best to do it now before they have a nuclear weapon, and we're going to have to confront Russia. Is it possible that a guy like Putin will use nuclear weapons against a free country like the UK, like England? He's threatened to do that in the past. I don't know that I don't know that would actually be the case, because he would, I think, ignite a wider conflagration that would mean his end. It would mean his end pretty quickly. And I think they would catch him. Do you know how badass the SAS is?
They're pretty cool. John, I'm pretty torn on this, but what do you
Um, I agree. It's an act of war, and we have to remember it's not just killing a few people on Britain's soil, but they put, I don't know how much of the population at risk with that nerve agent if it spread and got around. So it is a little bit more than just Russia killing a few people. I don't know if I think it would justify trying to assassinate him. I mean, that's what he did there. So,
And that's what he does. That's what he does to all his political opponents. So I think it's time for the karmic wheel to turn.
I'm all for that. If you've got a way to assassinate him, do it. I wouldn't be opposed to that at all.
Yeah, but the thing is, so part of the reason why I feel torn is that I agree with you, Michael, in the sense, and so there's people who I was talking to back in 2018. They weren't wrong when they were saying things like the British Army is way too small. We don't really have any munitions. We have nuclear weapons, but we don't. We aren't the military power that we used to be, and so doing all this stuff is really tough. So I'm not. So I'm not even really sure how we solve this. Actually, Mike. Sorry, Daniel. Do we have to be out? It's 7. Is there a hard out?
No hard out.
Okay, we're coming up to time. Let me just do the super chats and then we'll round up. So we've got $5 from Jonathan. Thank you so much, Jonathan, and also from Catherine. And then Megan has given $2 and commented, "Great job with Dr. Stockman, Mark." Because you did Enemy of the People, right?
Yes, I did. Unfortunately, the only performance they archived was when I had a severe case of laryngitis. One of the cast members got me sick. And so I soldiered through a performance with no voice, and they didn't tape any other performance, unfortunately. But I think Thursday was a really good show, and Saturday and Sunday I was getting back online with my voice, but that's not the one that exists for posterity. So I'm hoping my wife and I are going to put this play up, and you're all invited because we may do it in Paris and the United States. So we'll give our European friends a chance to see it, and our
cool.
American friends too.
Are you going to come to London?
Yeah, I'm supposed to come to Liverpool, and I'm supposed to come to Scotland, I think, in the fall. So if I'm there, I'll give you a ring. You can come to the con.
All right. So just to final thoughts then on this. How do we how do we solve the world's problems? So what do we do about about these countries? So because people would say to me we can be more intelligent about this. So do we use our intelligence services to kind of attack Russia behind the scenes, or what do we do? So because Michael, you kind of said you proposed the real problems that are with doing this. I don't disagree.
Yeah, Michael's not wrong, by the way. I mean, I agree with that, but it is an act of war, and something has to be done to make them pay for what they've done.
It's a cost-benefit analysis. I mean, yes, going to war with them would be a heavy, great cost, but we have to ask ourselves, what is the likely cost of letting him get away with something like that? And then you just have to decide.
Yeah, I mean, is the cost Ukraine? Is the cost Estonia? Is the cost now the rest of the Baltic states? Is the cost Finland? I mean, when does the guy going to stop if nobody's willing to stand up to him because they think it's too high an immediate price to pay?
Any thoughts, Michael?
I don't know. I don't know the answer. I think that John is right. It's a cost-benefit analysis, and unfortunately for me right now, it's a cost-benefit analysis that's way above my pay grade because I really don't know at at what point is it too risky? At what point does he get too strong? I know one thing: if he hits Estonia, I believe Estonia is a member of NATO, and then they invoke Article 5. So what's his cost-benefit analysis? Does Putin risk that? I don't know. I mean, Ukraine is kind of borderline, right? I mean, they're kind of an ally. We kind of want him in NATO, maybe not. So maybe he's willing to take that risk, and maybe we're willing to take the risk of sending some weapons, but not some troops. And maybe that's where it ends. I ultimately have no idea.
For sure. Any other thoughts, Mark, John?
Yeah, I mean, our politicians have got us into quagmire after quagmire, economic and political quagmires, because of their pragmatism. The only way out is a hard way out, unfortunately. Not quite sure what that means on the international stage. Not quite sure what that means economically, but we're going to have to feel lots of pinches, and we're going to have to endure that if we want to get out of this, I think, greater entanglement that's going to cause worse problems down the line.
For sure. All right, guys, we'll wrap it up. As per usual, whilst we may not have solved the world's problems, I think we've come up with some good suggestions, if only the world's leaders would listen. But thank you so much for joining us. And we'll be back tomorrow with the Daily Objective and the reality show. And we'll see you then.
Thanks,
Take-
everyone.